Good to be with you. I'm Tony DeCopel. The major breaking news right now. A daring American military operation inside Venezuela. More than 150 aircraft lighting up the night sky as the Army's elite Delta Force captured dictator Nicolas Maduro. Commandos raiding his compound before dawn, grabbing he and his wife in their pajamas, just moments before they could lock themselves into a safe room made of steel. And President Trump posting this picture of Maduro handcuffed aboard a U.S. warship. What happens to him now? And what made the president give the go-ahead to strike? Charlie D'Agata is standing by with details of the raid, and Scott McFarland on the next steps in the legal case against Maduro. Also breaking the cheers in the streets, crowds from Caracas to Miami, victims of Maduro, some openly weeping. Former political dissidents said they had been waiting their whole life for this moment.
We have been living in a dictatorship for about 20 years. So I can tell you, this feels like a breath of fresh air.
Parents waking up their kids to tell them the dictator had fallen. But what actually comes next? The president on that tonight as he says America is going to, quote, run the country. And hanging over it all, the question of oil. Venezuela, home to the largest proven reserves in the world, but driven to skyrocketing prices and food shortages under Maduro. President Trump tonight saying he's taking back what was stolen.
This is a special edition of the CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel.
Good evening. Great to be with you tonight. 2 days earlier than expected with that major breaking news that could shape the year, maybe even the century. After months of buildup at 2:01 a.m. local time today in Caracas, Venezuela, U.S. Delta forces slipped into the home of dictator Nicolas Maduro. By 3:30 a.m., he and his wife were in American custody. They landed at an airport north of New York City just a few hours ago and will face drug and gun charges in a New York courtroom. We're going to have a live report from there in just a moment. But first, more on the raid, a mission that President Trump today compared to nothing seen since World War II. Charlie D'Agata is in West Palm Beach for us following all of it. Charlie, good evening.
Good evening to you, Tony. The Venezuelan dictator's wife now face charges here in the United States after this stunning operation that deposed a head of state and now leaves the U.S. in charge of a country with no clear leadership or no clear plan forward. Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores touched down in New York this evening after an audacious snatch-and-grab operation in Venezuela overnight. In the early hours of Saturday morning, a swarm of U.S. military helicopters, special forces units known as the Night Stalkers, descended on Caracas, and explosions lit up the sky, signaling that Operation Absolute Resolve was underway.
It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice.
President Trump and his team watched the mission unfold from his Mar-a-Lago home as soldiers of the Army's elite Delta Force dropped in and breached Maduro's compound just after 2 a.m. local time.
He was trying to get into a safe place. You know, the safe place is all steel. And he wasn't able to make it to the door because our guys were so fast.
Officials tell CBS News that a CIA source inside the Maduro government had tracked the dictator's movements for months.
Where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets.
Within 2.5 hours of U.S. forces touching down, Maduro and his wife were at sea. The president posting this image of a handcuffed and blindfolded Maduro aboard the USS Iwo Jima. One of the U.S. helicopters was hit and some U.S. soldiers were injured in the raid.
On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force and self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit.
Horrible. At least 5 strategic targets were hit, including military bases and the country's main port.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
The president said today the U.S. will take over Venezuela without explaining how that's going to work. how long it could last or whether U.S. troops would be needed to do it. He also said the U.S. will take over the country's oil reserves.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
Trump suggested that Venezuela's vice president, now interim president Delcy Rodriguez, will cooperate. But today she denounced the U.S. operation and insisted Maduro is still the head of state. Pentagon officials say this mission was months in the making. Commandos actually built a replica of the Maduro compound in order to rehearse, and around 150 aircraft were involved.
Charlie, let's get back to who's in charge there now. Maduro's departure obviously raises that question, and you had President Trump today say the U.S. is going to run the country. That certainly got our attention. How does that work?
You know, Tony, all afternoon we've been making those phone calls. What does that look like? So the president says he's going to work with this new government, this interim government. He wants to send American oil companies in there, but you have to talk about security. What does that mean in terms of U.S. troops? One thing we do know for certain, the Pentagon tells us that massive military buildup that you and I have been discussing over the past few weeks and months will remain at least off the coast of Venezuela in that region.
Charlie D'Agata for us with the breaking news today. Charlie, thank you very much. Appreciate it. After this morning's capture, U.S. law enforcement officials flew Maduro and his wife to New York to be processed at the headquarters of the Drug Enforcement Administration. CBS's Ali Bauman is there right now. Ali, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Quite the scene.
Yeah, Tony, we are here outside the DEA offices in Manhattan waiting for Nicolas Maduro to arrive. Federal authorities tell us this is being handled like the bust of a drug kingpin. Venezuela's strongman Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores arrived in New York late this afternoon, stepping onto American soil chained and shackled, surrounded by a small army of FBI agents and heavily armed DEA officers. The couple was flown by helicopter to Manhattan to be booked and fingerprinted. Maduro will be held at the federal detention facility in Brooklyn, the same facility that once held Sean Diddy Combs and currently holds United Healthcare accused killer Luigi Mangione. And the former Venezuelan president could make his first appearance in court for an arraignment as soon as Monday. Tony?
Ali, thank you very much. Appreciate it. For more on the legal picture, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi said today that Maduro and his wife, quote, will soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil in American courts. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarland now joins us with details on the legal case against the former Venezuelan strongman.
Yeah, Tony, yesterday, Nicolas Maduro was the leader of Venezuela. And tonight, he's arguably the highest profile criminal defendant in America, with a possible court date as early as Monday. Newly unsealed criminal charges against Nicolas Maduro and his wife allege the ousted Venezuelan leader abused his position of trust and engaged in corruption for a quarter century. The Department of Justice accuses Maduro of tarnishing his office and executing a conspiracy to traffic cocaine into America.
Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region.
An initial court appearance is expected at the federal courthouse in Manhattan, where longtime Trump ally Jay Clayton is the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi wrote today they will soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil in American courts. The newly unsealed indictment against Maduro adds to allegations in a 2020 case, which alleged he worked to traffic drugs with a Colombian guerrilla group called the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC. The Justice Department also links Maduro's alleged conspiracy to the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, which allegedly engaged in extortions, kidnappings, murders, and other crimes. The Maduro arrest is similar to another U.S. operation 36 years ago to the day, when Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega was captured by U.S. forces and flown to the U.S. to face drug trafficking charges. It's expected, if not certain, the Department of Justice is going to see pretrial detention for Maduro. One complication here, there are a number of Venezuelan suspected gang members in the local New York City lockups, Tony. They're going to have to deal with that.
All right, Scott, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Taking a turn here now. When President Trump was asked exactly who would be running the country of Venezuela temporarily, he referred to the officials standing there behind him at the podium. And one of those officials joins us now, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us. I want to begin tonight with the soldiers and sailors involved in this. We're very happy. Thank you again. We are very happy to hear that there was no loss of American life in this mission. And I understand you're just back from Joint Base Andrews, where you met with some of the team members involved in all of this. How are they doing? And you were watching this unfold. What did you see?
I saw the best of America. I saw men and women dedicating their lives to defending our country and to accomplishing that mission. And I just landed here at Joint Base Andrews, had a chance to meet a lot of them firsthand who were involved, walked through the tick-tock of what can only be described as the most sophisticated, most complicated, and most successful joint special operations raid of all time. I mean, nothing of this size scope when you actually unpack what was done kinetically and non-kinetically, that many people, that many moving parts, that consequential, and they got the job done. And despite any obstacles in front of them, it is incredible to be able to serve such courageous, brave, and skilled Americans. We do right by them, and President Trump did. He gave them a clear mission, and they finished it.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I'd love to talk about the mission now because there are questions about what happens next in Venezuela. The president said today that the U.S. is going to be running the country. What does that look like? Does that mean we're going to see Americans on the corners of Venezuela, in the government of Venezuela? Are you prepared to have troops on the ground in Venezuela?
Well, it means we set the terms. President Trump sets the terms, and ultimately he'll decide what the iterations are of that. But it means the drugs stop flowing. It means the oil that was taken from us is returned ultimately, and that criminals are not sent to the United States. It means that foreign countries don't have a lodgment inside our hemisphere. So ultimately, we're going to control what happens next because of this brave decision. President Trump has shown American leadership, and he'll be able to dictate where we go next.
So, Mr. Secretary, then, by your words there, I imagine you are prepared for a full-scale U.S. intervention to stabilize the country of Venezuela if asked for by the president. If that comes to pass, will you ask Congress for approval? Do you believe legally you need to ask Congress for approval?
Well, we're postured, and the president said the blockade continues, no oil going in and out, no drug boats allowed to traffic in the Caribbean or the East Pac, so we're still poised there. This was a law enforcement exercise. It was the Department of War in support of the Department of Justice pulling out an indicted person who ultimately will face justice, and Marco was clear there that this is not something you notify Congress about beforehand, but were there to be more or extensions to this, of course we'll keep Congress involved. They're our partners, and we would do so.
All right, Mr. Secretary, hold there for just a moment. We're going to fit in a commercial break. To our viewers at home, we'll be back shortly with more with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Stay with us. You're watching the CBS Evening News. We're back. You're watching the CBS Evening News. If you're just joining us, we're in a live conversation with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, just back from Joint Base Andrews, where he met some of the soldiers and sailors involved in that mission in Venezuela. Mr. Secretary, thank you for staying with us. I want to go back to the, to the rationale tonight. Is it about freedom or is it about oil? At the press conference today, President Trump seemed to indicate that both were a factor.
Freedom, security, prosperity. Of course, there are what was done by Venezuela against American oil interests, oil companies, is well understood and never should have happened, and President Trump is willing to recapture that. But it's also the security of our hemisphere. If people understood what Venezuela was trafficking in with other adversaries, weapons they were trafficking, and then, of course, the drugs and the cartels, the poisoning of the American people, the violence, Tren de Aragua that have been brought to our shores, all three of those combined together in this bold and courageous action from President Trump. He takes nothing off the table. So what happens next will be in the hands of Venezuelans to decide, but ultimately America will benefit security-wise and with prosperity, and we believe the Venezuelan people can as well.
You know, Mr. Secretary, today at the press conference, you said, and I'm going to say it slowly so I get it right, Maduro effed around and found out. And that's obviously a message not only to Maduro, but to many American adversaries around the world. And it comes on the heels of President Trump saying that U.S. intervention in Iran would be possible if Iran kills protesters. It comes as Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Cuba should possibly be worried tonight. What's next here? What's the message? Who did you have in mind when you said F around and find out globally?
Well, I referred also to the Iranians and their nuclear capabilities. The president said they will never get a nuclear bomb. The Iranians didn't believe it. He acted. He said the same thing about Maduro. He acted. He said the same thing with the Houthis. He acted. Southern border acted. We're going to do something about drugs. He's acting. We're acting with striking drug boats. This is a president of action. And you don't get peace in this dangerous world without strength. So there's been a lot of politicians that want to talk. They want to talk peace. They want to talk diplomacy. They want to talk negotiations. They want to talk globalism, international organizations. President Trump speaks through action. And so our allies understand that, and they're stepping up, spending more. Our adversaries understand that. So all around the world should take notice. American leadership is back. When he says something matters, it does. And we will take the necessary action with the full weight of the Department of War.
You know, Mr. Secretary, in the aftermath of this successful mission, there were tears of joy in Caracas, in Miami. Venezuelan refugees obviously thrilled to see Maduro out of power, his capture. You can understand why. They've got all that oil, and yet the country itself has skyrocketing prices. His own people have been starving. And yet a meaningful number of Americans would wake up to this news and they'd be ripped back 20 years to another American president, another U.S. intervention. I'm thinking of the war in Iraq. And that led to a significant loss of U.S. treasure and of U.S. blood. Many of the president's own supporters tonight are wondering, how is this time around going to be different, and how is it in the U.S. interest?
It's the exact opposite. I mean, we spent decades and decades and purchased in blood and got nothing economically in return. And President Trump flips the script. He says through strategic action, we can ensure that we have access to additional wealth and resources, enabling a country to unleash that without having to spend American blood. I mean, this was a bold and audacious move, but it was thought through. It was well orchestrated. Our military had time to set it up. He provided the resources, and then he took that bold stroke. And through it, we flipped that very dynamic. And Americans will benefit. Venezuela has a long history of being a rich and prosperous country. It's been stolen away from its people by horrific leadership. We can do both, help them and help the United States in the Western Hemisphere by reestablishing the Monroe Doctrine. Peace through strength with our allies was demonstrated last night. And I think I know the hemisphere will benefit from President Trump's bold action.
All right, Mr. Secretary, we're going to ask you to hold there for one more commercial break. We're going to fit it in now to our viewers. You're watching the CBS Evening News. We'll be back in just a moment with one final question for Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Stay with us. We're back on the CBS Evening News with one final question tonight with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Mr. Secretary, it is very difficult to look into the future, but part of your job is to do so. What can you tell us about what the next week in Venezuela is going to look like?
It's going to look like American strength. It's going to look like options for President Trump. It's going to look like protecting American interests and ensuring they're advanced, stopping drugs, ensuring that ultimately the oil resources are, he said it clearly at the podium today, we're going to get American companies in there. We're going to get investment there. These oil depots have been operating at 20% capacity. That's going to change. And we're going to stop the flood of people into the United States. It's a good day.
Mr. Secretary, we'll end it on that. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back in a moment with the CBS Evening News. We're back in the CBS Evening News. We've got Charlie D'Agata back with us with one final question for him as well. Charlie, you've been watching this military buildup in the region there outside of Venezuela for a while now. That certainly indicated something. So the question is, what are you going to be watching for in the days ahead for what happens next?
You know, Tony, you asked Secretary Hegseth the key question. Is the United States ready to re-engage in Venezuela? It may be entering the most volatile session area right now that it has for years. So the U.S. military is poised, but the question is whether they're going to stay off the coast or re-engage in Venezuela.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot more that they are ready for that they're not ready to talk about publicly. Charlie, thank you very much. I appreciate it. To our viewers, we're going to leave you tonight in this very, very new year with the sky over Venezuela, as we all begin to consider what happened there, what will happen next, and how big of a moment this really is. It was a daring demonstration of American power, that is for sure. It was also a political gamble for President Trump. Many victims of the now deposed regime of Nicolas Maduro have been rejoicing. They've been in the streets all day today. But we've been here before, of course. Will what follows be a, quote, safe, prosperous, and judicious transition, as President Trump has promised, or will it be something else? And was the administration's actions legal? Well, the drug flows have dried up. What about the oil? What will this mean for gas prices at home? We'll be with you covering it every step of the way. But for now, that's another day in America and the world, my first as the anchor of the CBS Evening News. Good night.